Welcome to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. I am your host, Bronin. Thank you for tuning in once again. Or if you're joining the show for the first time, 1,000 welcomes. I've got a big show planned today. I'm going to be talking about some terminations coming to Fort Worth ISD employees, all kinds of phony baloney non-jobs. Wait till you hear the titles. Meanwhile, Dallas is potentially looking to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on brand new public transit, on a brand new streetcar line. But I thought we were broke. So how does that work? I also want to check in on what's going on with some of the major statewide races and some of the congressional races that are going to run off next month at the end of May. But before we jump in, please make sure to like, subscribe, follow, download the Real Texas Radio Podcast from wherever you stream, and follow the show on X at RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. All right now, you're listening to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Bronin, just a fed-up taxpayer bringing you all of your Texas, local, and national news. I'm going to kick off the show today in Fort Worth, Texas, just down the street a spell from Dallas. And Fort Worth ISD, the independent school district, as you may or may not know, has been taken over by the state, which seems to be happening all over the place here in Texas because the school district is essentially a failure. Declining enrollment, and just about 1 in 3 kids can read on grade level. That seems to be about the national average, whether you're in rural New Hampshire, where there are very few, if any, illegal aliens in the school district. And it's all native-born kids. They can't seem to read either, many of them. Whether you're in Dallas, whether you're in Fort Worth, it doesn't really seem to matter in what state. Although I do understand that Mississippi and Louisiana have made significant strides of late. I'm not sure how they pull that off. So Fort Worth ISD has been taken over by the state, and they just had a public meeting earlier this week. Over 100 speakers showed up. So I'm going to be reading a little bit from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. I'll skip around the article, but it turns out that the district, they have been operating as if enrollment is close to 90,000 students, which that's significantly less than Dallas ISD, which I think has about 130,000 students, which is still significantly down from a decade ago. And Fort Worth, believe it or not, I believe the Fort Worth total population is greater than Austin, Texas. People may not realize this, but Fort Worth is a big city in its own right. But they're actually going to be enrolling a projected 65 or 66,000 students come fall 2026. And so part of the state takeover is a restructuring of positions. And they're going to cut all of these positions, which is why apparently so many parents showed up. Most of them are going to be ESL and ELL supporting positions. I'm going to read you this list of positions that the district is going to cut. And I've got some cuts from the meeting from some of the speakers who showed up. Let's go ahead and start off. I'm going to play one cut from a speaker at the meeting.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
I got another one here.
Always said the same thing. Our children, our children, our children.
We might have some more cuts from speakers as the segment moves along. So here are some of the positions. I can't even read them all. There's so many positions that they eliminated. Just listen to some of these titles. Post-secondary specialists. Do you have any idea what that is? I have no idea what that is. Campus administrative assistants. But wait, there's more. That's just the first half of the title. Dash, college and career readiness. How many of those do you think are employed by Fort Worth ISD or formerly employed, or this is going to be their last year? SET or SET teachers / LC elementary teachers. Now, they were able to get the word teacher into that title, but I have a funny feeling that those teachers, they're not running their own classroom. They're not the classroom teacher, which means they're probably not spending a whole lot of time with kids. Now, this next group, this is really special. These people must have cost a lot of money. Executive Director of Emergent Bilingual Programs. And then there's another director of Secondary Emergent Bilingual. And then there's a third director of Elementary Emergent Bilingual. Followed by 3 different coordinator positions, including a Secondary Emergent Bilingual coordinator, and then a dual language K-12 coordinator, and then multiple ESL K-12 coordinators. And then they've got an analyst for emergent bilingual budget. And this goes on and on and on. A director of elementary literacy, analyst of learning and leading, director of college career and military readiness, not to be confused by the multiple coordinators of college readiness. And only 1 in 3 kids is reading on grade level in Fort Worth ISD. With all of these experts, with all of these highly qualified bilingualists in the district, and they can only manage to get 1 in 3 students to read on grade level. And we've got all the parents showing up, protesting all of these cuts because they're just afraid of what their children's education is going to be with all of these staff cut.
Oh, you have to read the book.
I mean, can it get any worse? There's only 1 in 3 kids can read. Can it get worse? I mean, you may as well try cutting, because I'm not sure that it can get worse. And you know what this is a good reminder of? If you have not voted yet in the Dallas ISD bond election, the district is requesting from the voters $6.2 billion, the bulk of which will go to brand new schools, despite the declining enrollment. Vote no. And I know this is Dallas, which is not under state takeover. Dallas, obviously very different from Fort Worth. But this is why you don't vote for bonds. Because you don't think that Dallas has all those positions as well. They may have different titles. But all of these fake, phony, baloney non-jobbers. Now, meanwhile, they're probably still going to be hiring teachers because it's difficult to get classroom teachers. How many of those positions that are eliminated? It looks like dozens, if not scores of positions, probably worth millions of dollars in total. How many of those people do you think are going to apply to just be classroom teachers in Fort Worth? These experts in bilingual, all of these reading specialists, all of these ESL, ELL specialists. Do you think we could repurpose their expertise for a job where there's actually a vacancy and a need? Classroom teacher? No. They're going to run away. They're going to ferret into other fake jobs if there are any remaining. They'll be stabbing each other in the back to get fake, phony, baloney non-jobs, or they're going to just move on to another school district, and they're going to get a fake job in another school district, which is another. I saw it throughout my whole career in the classroom. Somebody, an ex-teacher, would get a friend in the administration, and they'd make a fake job for the person, testing coordinator, and the person was just a total busybody gossip running around the school, absolutely useless, dead weight, helping nobody but her own self. Men get into these positions as well. And then somebody takes a closer look, something changes, different administrator, and next thing you know, that's the first position on the chopping block. They're gone. And they run to another campus. The administration might say, "Hey, we've got 3 teacher vacancies for the next year. You were a teacher for 15 years. Would you like to rejoin the classroom and share all that expertise and knowledge that you developed with our children?" No, hell no. Hell no. They're gone. They found another non-job quick as could be, don't you know? So this is why you vote no on bonds. Because why don't you get your house in order with the enormous budget that you have, with the exorbitant property taxes that you levy on the residents, the homeowners, the property owners of Dallas, of Fort Worth, everywhere. $1 on the 100. They essentially charge $1 on the 100 valuation in Dallas for the school district. At one point, it was almost $1.50. Can you believe that? And so you got to vote no. Fort Worth has a bond program coming up for the city, not for the school district, and it's just contagious, and it's pernicious. These bonds, every city, every time I read about what's going on in a DFW area, city, Arlington, Carrollton, they've all got bonds. I don't know if Richardson has a bond. They might put parks at the top of the list, libraries. I think that's what Fort Worth is saying. That's what they want with most of their money. Vote no. If you keep voting yes, they're going to keep asking for more. It's the HOA from hell, these city councils, these school boards. That's all they are. And they will keep shaking you down for as long as you allow them to shake you down. So keep voting no. You have to show up and you have to vote no. And just to be clear, that bond election for DISD, and by the way, bond is just a synonym for long-term, high-interest debt. That's all it means, opening up a brand new credit card while you still have a maxed out credit card open that you're paying interest on. That election is May 2nd. I think by the time you're listening to this show, the early voting period is over. Okay, before I jump into a local Dallas story, I want to just talk about some of the big races at the state level and DFW. Jasmine Crockett, you know that she's still here. I guess she's still in the Congress for the rest of 2026, but she's been pretty quiet, except last week it's reported in the Dallas Morning News and elsewhere that she's going to be making a big announcement. And now, just I think 2 weeks ago, she was blabbing about how she didn't know what she was going to do, and maybe she was going to get into a legal practice, or she wanted some flexibility. I think she was planning on having a bunch of options.
Do we know how to use a chair? Whether we pulling it up or we doing something else with it.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe her announcement is going to have something to do with chairs. Maybe she's gonna get into the chair industry or some such thing. That was a speech that she made to a college graduating class in the last couple of years. In any case, we will not be eagerly awaiting her announcement. Some people think it could be a book or a television job. We'll see. And then we've got in the congressional race, Colin Allred versus Julie Johnson, the white lesbian, fabulously wealthy, who you've never heard of. Colin Allred you may have heard of. He ran unsuccessfully for the Senate in 2024 against Ted Cruz, who beat the brakes off him. And then Jasmine Crockett scared him out of the Senate race. Now, he declared before Jasmine Crockett, and then she scared him away. He was scared that Jasmine Crockett was going to beat him. So he left the Senate race, and then he jumped back into, well, technically his former congressional district, which has been reconfigured as District 33, which pits him against Julie Johnson, the one-term incumbent. And, it was hard to get accurate temperature check on that primary back in March of this year. But Allred, he actually won. I was surprised, but not enough votes to evade a runoff. So now he's in the runoff. I did get a mailer for Colin Allred. I think this, maybe I've gotten one other mailer for him before, but that's going right to the bottom of the birdcage. But, Julie Johnson, she just tweeted out 3 pieces of legislation that Colin Allred supported. And one of them, basically they were all, it was all legislation that had to do with restrictions on illegal immigration. And Julie Johnson, of course, she's touting that as a mark, as a scarlet letter against Colin Allred. So I think if you are thinking about getting into the Democrat runoff, if you're going to take a Democrat ballot in the runoff, which is next month, I think the official election day is May 20-something, but early voting will open prior. I think you're going to have to hold your nose and vote for Colin Allred. And, Julie Johnson, she's inconsequential because she's a first-termer, but I think I'd like to see her gone. And I don't care if Colin Allred is just running around job grubbing. I think he's still probably the better of the two, or the lesser of the two evils. And then in the Attorney General race here in Texas, I think a lot of people were very surprised by the outcome of the primary. That Mays Middleton, he ended up winning in a 4-candidate race. He didn't win enough. He didn't get over the 50% again to keep himself out of the runoff. But Chip Roy, who had a much better name recognition, the best of all the candidates in the field for sure, and Mays Middleton beat Chip Roy by about 7 points. And now Mays Middleton, he's well spoken. He's very good at articulating his message as being the most conservative candidate in the field, as being MAGA Mays, they call him, and he endorses that moniker, MAGA Mays. And he points to Chip Roy's record of sometimes clashing with Trump and siding with the Liz Cheney type Republicans. And I think that Mays Middleton has done a really solid job of distinguishing himself from Chip Roy. He's got a very conservative record. He's a state senator from the Harris County, Galveston area. Attorney, he comes from oil and gas money. He's a millionaire. I think he self-funded a lot of his campaign. And I was aware of him, that he was in the race in the primary. I didn't vote for him, and I was definitely surprised that he won. I think he beat Chip Roy by 150,000 votes or so. And I think I've seen some of what the betting market is looking like, and I think it's heavily favoring Mays Middleton to win the runoff against Chip Roy next month. We'll have to see. And finally, there's still no endorsement. Probably the biggest race statewide that everybody has got their eyes on is Ken Paxton, the outgoing Attorney General, versus incumbent U.S. Senator John Cornyn. And that's another race like the AG race where one candidate is painting himself as the inheritor, the defender of MAGA, and Cornyn, he's kind of having to defend himself as getting a bit of a rhino reputation, although I keep pointing out, number one, Cornyn, he did win the primary. Obviously, he still triggered a runoff, but he did beat Paxton. And it was a 3-way race. Wesley Hunt, a first-term congressman from the Harris County area. And when President Trump was here in Corpus Christi just before the primary, back in the end of February, I think it was, he didn't endorse anybody. He didn't endorse a candidate. He still has not endorsed a candidate. Wesley Hunt has not endorsed either of his former opponents. Governor Abbott has not endorsed a candidate in this race. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has not endorsed a candidate in this race. So, in both sides, I think they're pointing to polls, but I don't really think the polls are worth much of a damn. I'd be more worried about the betting market. So we'll have to see who is going to win, Paxton or Cornyn. I keep pointing out Paxton, Attorney General, probably the most MAGA Attorney General in the country, definitely in contention for that slot. And guess what? Trump did not, at least publicly, I didn't hear it leaked or anything, that Ken Paxton's name was in the mix to replace Pam Bondi in the Justice Department. So that might have, because he wouldn't be confirmed in the Senate. That's, I would say, that's the real reason. He wouldn't be confirmed, and all of his baggage would be dragged through the mud. And, I don't know, what you couldn't have offered DOJ to Cornyn and then let Cornyn retire out of the DOJ after a lengthy Senate career. Cornyn probably wouldn't have gone for that. Trump probably wouldn't have gone for that either. I don't think he views Cornyn as enough of a pit bull. And that's, I think, the kind of person he wants in the office. So I'll leave it there, and I'm going to move into my last local Dallas story here. You got to love Dallas. On Friday last week, the city manager published a statement claiming that the city is essentially flat broke. There is a hiring freeze on all positions except for police. Everybody needs to tighten their belt. There's going to be no more travel. We really need to keep a close eye on expenses, right? We're broke. The city is broke. Another tough budget year. The sales tax revenue is under projections. We got to find over $30 million. It's just a total disaster. It's a disaster, according to Kim Tolbert, Dallas city manager, right? So then Tuesday of this week, right? So we're totally broke. Meanwhile, we're on the hook for over $50 million for the female professional basketball team's practice facility, which hasn't broken ground yet, as far as I know. And the price tag of that is ballooned. Even if Dallas isn't on the hook for the rest of the price tag, we're on the hook for $50 million plus of the practice facility. And we're demolishing our convention center to build a brand new convention center. We don't even have a price tag for that yet, but we know it's into the billions. It will probably be $5 or $6 billion by the time that's done. So we're building that, and I won't even go into all the other things that we're building or rehabbing. We're broke though, right? The city is broke. And now on Tuesday, I'm recording this segment of the show on April 28th, the Dallas Morning News publishes an article, and I actually learned about this a month ago at a budget town hall meeting. But now we're going to be constructing a new streetcar line that's going to run in an L shape between Fair Park and downtown Dallas. It's going to ferry people between downtown Dallas, the brand new convention center, I guess, where there's already a dart station, by the way, and Fair Park. And you know how much it costs, according to the article that I read, to build 1 mile of track for a streetcar? $15 to $20 million. And I don't know the exact mileage, but it's going to be more than 2 miles anyway. And that doesn't include, obviously, the cost of the actual vehicle. So let's break this down. Now, Dallas already has 2 different streetcar lines. We've got the Bishop Arts streetcar, which I think is maybe a little bit over 2 miles. And then we've got the vintage trolleys, which run from uptown to downtown, and that's under 5 miles of track. Okay, so we've already got about 7-ish miles of streetcar track in Dallas currently. And they don't connect, by the way. These lines, they do not connect. If you were going to take the streetcar from uptown, for example, you were going to go downtown and then you thought you were going to get to Bishop Arts, you'd have to walk maybe a mile to get to the other streetcar. So they don't connect. There's been discussion of connecting those lines, but no. So what's going to happen is now they're going to build, allegedly, possibly, a third streetcar line that is also not going to connect to the two existing streetcar lines. And Adam Basildua, the council member for the area, District 7, he's very enthusiastic about the project because, finally, this is an investment in his underrepresented community. Okay. When was the last time that you needed to get from Fair Park to downtown Dallas, to City Hall, to the convention center? When was the last time that you needed to traverse that route? Can I ask you? I don't have the crickets queued up, but I'll wait a moment. I certainly have never needed to traverse that specific route. Certainly not by a streetcar or any other kind of public transit. So it's just kind of flabbergasting, isn't it? Is that flabbergasting? Is that a word? I'm flabbergasted. I'll put it that way. That Friday, the city announces that we're broke. And then Tuesday, just a few days later, plans are announced in the newspaper of record here in Dallas, the Dallas Morning News, that we're now looking into building a new streetcar line. So how are we going to pay for that? Well, Plano, which Dallas hopefully has sent copious thank you letters to Plano for initiating the arm twisting of DART, for forcing DART to come to the negotiating table and stop confiscating all of this sales tax money, or as much of it as they do from all of the member cities, despite the abysmal ridership numbers. Although I read an item today, can you believe this? DART claims that in Q1 2026, between January 1st and March 31st of this year, that there were 4.6 million light rail trips. Can you believe that? If you're listening to this show, you've probably never been on the DART. Even if you live in Dallas, you've probably never been on the DART. And even more bus rides. More than 5 million light rail trips. It was 4.6 million just for Dallas. And then I think Garland or Irving might have been next for the light rail. And then bus trips even more, represented over 50% of all the trips. Can you believe that there were over 10 million trips between bus and light rail for DART in just Q1 2026? Do you really believe that? Because I don't. But that's what they claim. But anyway, Plano, God bless them, they said to DART, we're going to leave unless you come to the negotiating table. And then many other DART member cities, they got on board with that strategy. And DART came to the negotiating table. And DART agreed to return some of the sales tax money incrementally over the next 5 or 6 years, I believe. And so Dallas stands to gain hundreds of millions of dollars potentially, or just keep hundreds of millions of dollars in the sales tax it levies on any spending in Dallas, most spending. And so Adam Basildua comes out and says, well, why don't we take all of that money, or a good chunk of it, and build a brand new streetcar line in my district? I think that's what we should do with all of the recaptured sales tax from DART. We should build more public transit. But we're broke. On Friday, we're broke. But on Tuesday, now we're going to repurpose all of this money, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, in Adam Basildua's mind, oh, we're going to be getting federal and state grants too, according to him, for this new streetcar line that nobody's going to use, that nobody is going to ride. Have you been on the Bishop Arts streetcar? Talk about loud. Talk about screeching. It is the equivalent of sitting next to 5 screaming infants on a plane riding that Bishop Arts streetcar line. And there's nobody on it. The one time that I've taken it. And you know what? The type of public transit that I typically would need is crosstown travel. And most public transit, when it was built, it was with the idea of moving people from outside of the city into the city and not really getting across the city. That's how most public transit was established in this country. So if I wanted to get to Bishop Arts, which I go there, it's a neighborhood that I visit more frequently, it takes an hour to take the bus from my home, and then I have to go downtown to the West End, which is the zombie apocalypse, which is one of the overdose capitals of Dallas. And then I have to walk from the zombie apocalypse West End in downtown about 15 minutes. That's going at a good clip. To walk over to Union Station to catch the streetcar to go to Bishop Arts. And then on the way, the whole trip on the streetcar, which it's just me and a few other people, the thing is screeching worse than a bunch of infants and toddlers on an airplane. And it takes an hour. And the Uber, even in bad traffic, would take 25 minutes in bad traffic. Less time, and if there's no traffic. So what is this new streetcar going to do for me? What is it going to do for you? Even if you're a disenfranchised, underrepresented, under-resourced resident of South Dallas, what is this new streetcar going to do for you? And you know what else? Adam Basildua, he's Hispanic, but white people, a lot of the white progressives, they're going to endorse this plan to build new streetcar. Other city councilors, they're interested in it, the white ones. And, you know, white people, for some reason, they get very aroused by rail, light rail, high-speed rail. There's no high-speed rail in the United States. But they get very aroused anytime you start talking about trains. It shoots a tingle right up their leg, even though they're not going to use it. Maybe they'll get on the streetcar for a photo op moment, but they don't use it. None of these people are using the light rail that they want you to pay for. And even though they know, just based on the ridership numbers, that you're not going to use it either. And in this route that this streetcar from Fair Park to downtown Dallas, they've carved out this L-shaped route. Why don't you run a bus on the route? Why don't you run a bus for 6 months and see how many people get on the bus as a pilot? And, you know, white people who get aroused and tingled by light rail, they don't like the bus, though, even though the bus is much cheaper. I mean, you could run a bus every 5 minutes on this route empty, and it would still be much, much, much cheaper. If you had somebody waiting at the bus stop and they called up the bus driver and said, "I'm here, can you come and get me?" And you were doing individual rides, you could probably do this with Uber. It's going to be cheaper than putting this streetcar onto the street. You know, I was doing a little bit of research earlier for this segment. How many miles of streetcar did there used to be in the United States? Do you have any guess in miles before I tell you? How many miles of streetcar in the United States? So this would have been over 100 years ago. I think it peaked maybe before World War II.
Clang, clang, clang went the trolley. Ding, ding, ding went the bell.
45,000 miles of streetcar. Electric vehicles. Electric streetcars. There were 45,000 miles in the United States. There were between 70 and 90 just in Dallas. And then, well, you know what happened. The car cartels came in and convinced everybody that they needed their own private car, and all the streetcar tracks were ripped up. And now here we are, 100 years later or more, and history is repeating itself. Now we want to put down the light rail tracks all over the place, even though nobody's going to use them because of cars. Do you think this, I didn't look this up, but do you think that it cost $15 to $20 million per mile of track 100 years ago to build a streetcar? How many consultants do you think were involved in the 45,000 miles of construction for streetcars? How many consultants do you think? How many consultants will broke Dallas pay in the development of a new streetcar line? How many consultants do you think? And how much will they each be paid? Do you think they're going to get nice round numbers? 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million. Nice round numbers. When was the last time you ever bought something that was a round number? A restaurant tab, a cocktail, an item in the store, a food item, clothing item. When was the last time you paid a bill that had a round number? But if you're a consultant, there's always a nice round number, usually a 6 or 7 figure number. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot more time on this subject, but it just something, just a contrast I wanted you to be aware of, right? So they're going to talk about libraries now for the next 6 months, and how they can't afford to keep open 4 libraries, or they need to close and go to a regional model because they can't come up with $2.7 million for libraries. But yet they can find $15 to $20 million per mile of brand new track for a new light rail, or a new streetcar. And then how much is a streetcar going to cost? Millions of dollars. Millions of dollars for the new streetcar. And then they're going to run it empty all day long, 7 days a week. But they can't come up with $2.7 million for the libraries because they're broke. Does any of this make sense to you? Or is this as illogical sounding to you as it is to me? Okay, this is a good place to wrap it up. I am Bronin. Thank you for tuning in once again to the Real Texas Radio Podcast. Dallas voters, make sure that you vote in the Dallas ISD bond election. Vote no all the way down. Don't even think about it. Vote no. The election is May 2nd. Hopefully we get some good news. I'm going to be hopeful, but I'm a pragmatist. Follow the show on X, RTR_Bronin, RTR_Bronin. Tell a friend to listen to the Real Texas Radio Podcast, and I will catch you on the next episode.